The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly over courtroom 3B, casting a harsh white glow on the polished wooden floors. Every cough, every shuffle of paper echoed too loudly, bouncing between the solemn faces seated along the narrow pews. At the defendant's table sat Mariah Johnson, 32 years old, dressed in a neatly pressed navy blouse, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her face was calm, almost too calm, masking the storm clawing at her insides. Her dark eyes darted briefly toward the judge's bench before returning to a fixed spot on the table. The bailiff called the room to order. Heavy doors groaned shut behind the last spectators. And then he entered. Judge Franklin Rowe, a graying, sharp-jawed man with a reputation for impatience and old-school judgment, took his seat like a king on his throne. His robes settled around him like armor. With a loud thump, he dropped Mariah's case file onto his desk. A few pages fluttered loose. He didn't bother picking them up. Instead, he peered down at Mariah, eyes narrowing as if trying to read a confession off her face. "Another single mother," he said aloud, voice dripping disdain, looking for handouts, blaming the world for her bad choices. The courtroom tensed. A murmur ran through the gallery, then fell into an uneasy silence. Mariah didn't flinch. She pressed her palms harder into the table until her knuckles whitened. Her attorney, a frazzled public defender named Mr. Patel, stood and stammered. "Your Honor, if we may proceed based on facts rather than..." Judge Rowe raised a hand sharply. "Sit down, counselor." He turned his attention back to Mariah. "Ms. Johnson," he said, leaning forward, "you are accused of falsifying employment documents to qualify for state housing assistance. You have 2 children, no father listed, and a history of missed rent payments. Why should I believe anything you say today?" A cruel, expectant silence followed. Mariah lifted her chin. Her voice was soft, but every word was stitched with steel. "Because truth isn't determined by what you think you see, Your Honor." There was something unnerving in her calmness. Something wrong. Judge Rowe's smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. The prosecution strutted forward, a stocky man in a tight gray suit, papers bristling in his hands. He waved them like a weapon. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing discrepancies in Ms. Johnson's stated income. We request the maximum penalty for fraud." Mariah's lawyer rose again, voice steadier this time. Permission for the defense to present new evidence. Judge Rowe rolled his eyes, drumming his fingers on the desk. "Fine, let's get this over with." From a battered briefcase, Mr. Patel pulled out a slim black folder and handed it to the bailiff, who brought it forward. Judge Rowe flipped it open lazily and froze. The room shifted. You could almost hear the tension crawling up the walls. In the folder were original letters, recommendations from multiple employers, pay stubs verified by state auditors, volunteer service logs from a local community center. Every accusation crumbled on sight. A hush blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. Mariah sat perfectly still, but her jaw tightened ever so slightly, not in fear, but in quiet rage. She had been ready for this. She had known. Judge Rowe coughed a nervous tick he rarely revealed. He skimmed the pages again, faster this time, looking for something, anything, to confirm his bias. Nothing. Mr. Patel cleared his throat. "Additionally, Your Honor," he said, "it may interest the court to know Ms. Johnson is not merely employed." He paused, letting the words dangle in the still air. "She is the director of a nonprofit that provides free legal counseling to low-income families, families like her own once were." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Several spectators leaned forward, faces slack with shock. Even a juror wiped at his eyes, embarrassed. Judge Rowe blinked rapidly, fingers twitching on the edge of his bench. He opened his mouth. No words came. Mariah finally stood. No outburst, no anger. She simply looked at him, this man who had already judged her life without knowing it. "Not every black woman in this courtroom is a stereotype, Your Honor," she said quietly. "Some of us fight battles you couldn't begin to understand." You could have heard a pin drop. Rowe's gavel, once so quick to slam down judgment, now lay limp in his hand. He looked small, exposed. Judge Rowe cleared his throat, voice barely audible. The court needs a recess to review these new documents. Before anyone could react, the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Two men in suits stepped in, not spectators, officials. One of them, a tall, stern-faced investigator, approached the bench and whispered something into the judge's ear. Rowe's face paled. He shook his head slightly. The man whispered again. Mariah watched without blinking. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Judge Rowe was quietly, almost invisibly, handed a folded sheet of paper with the government letterhead. A letter that would change everything. A letter accusing him of misconduct. Mariah turned toward the doors, her head high, her heart pounding, the taste of bittersweet justice rising in her mouth. The screen fades to black. The courtroom remained frozen, trapped between disbelief and something closer to fear. Judge Franklin Rowe's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. The whisper of the letter opening seemed louder than the ticking clock on the wall. He scanned the contents once, then again, as if willing the words to change. They didn't. Mariah watched from the defense table, her fingers curling around the hem of her blouse, feeling the tide shift, but unsure where it would land. The officials from the Office of Judicial Oversight stood like statues at the back of the courtroom, arms folded, badges flashing under the flickering lights. Judge Rowe cleared his throat once, twice, but the sound cracked. For the first time in years, the man who prided himself on control was utterly, visibly shaken. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he turned, almost stumbled, to the court reporter. We are calling an immediate recess," he croaked. "All parties remain available for further proceedings." The gavel, which had hammered down countless harsh sentences, now wavered in the air before dropping with a weak clack. The room exploded into hushed whispers. Reporters sprinted from the gallery, clutching their recorders, their notebooks, their phones. Mariah gathered her files carefully, every movement precise, steady, though her heart pounded in her ears. Mr. Patel leaned in, voice low. "Something bigger is happening," he said. "Much bigger." Mariah nodded once, sensing it too. Outside the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun stabbed through thick clouds, painting everything in harsh gold. A crowd was already gathering, spectators, media, curious onlookers. Mariah kept her head high as she stepped into the light, flanked by her attorney. A reporter shoved a microphone toward her face. "Ms. Johnson, did you know about the investigation into Judge Rowe before today?" She paused. For half a heartbeat, she considered answering. Instead, she simply smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and walked on. Somewhere behind her, the door slammed open again. Mariah turned slightly. The two officials emerged, escorting Judge Rowe, no longer proud, no longer untouchable, toward a waiting black SUV. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. 3 hours later, Mariah sat in a dimly lit coffee shop, her laptop open before her. Mr. Patel slid into the booth opposite, dropping a thick folder onto the table. The folder was stamped, "Confidential, Internal Review." Mariah's breath caught. "You were right to keep digging," Patel said, lowering his voice. He opened the folder, revealing a series of documents, court transcripts, internal memos, emails. A pattern emerged like blood blooming underwater. Dozens of cases, minorities, single parents, low-income defendants. Every one of them had faced unusually harsh sentences under Rowe's gavel, and hidden within the records a name. Devin Turner, a defense attorney who had once accused Rowe of bias and manipulation, an accusation that mysteriously disappeared. Patel tapped the name. "This," he said grimly, "is the thread. If we pull it, everything unravels." Mariah leaned forward, eyes sharp, her heart hammering. Devin Turner had vanished from the legal world 5 years ago. No articles, no cases, no explanation, just gone. Mariah's mind raced. She opened her laptop, typing furiously. Minutes later, she stared at the screen. A news clipping. Tiny. Buried. A fatal car crash. Driver Devin Turner. Suspected mechanical failure. Case closed, but the hair on Mariah's arm stood up. The accident occurred just days after Turner had filed a formal complaint against Judge Rowe, a complaint that never reached the Oversight Committee. Mariah swallowed hard. "This isn't just corruption," she whispered. "It's cover-up." Patel nodded grimly. "And if you're right, it means you're in danger now, too." Outside the coffee shop window, across the street, a black sedan idled, windows tinted too dark. The engine hummed low, almost predatory. Mariah's spine stiffened. Her instincts screamed a warning. They were being watched. Patel shoved the documents back into his briefcase. "We need to move." They stood quickly, leaving their coffees untouched. As they slipped out the side door, Mariah glanced over her shoulder. The black car pulled from the curb. Slowly, deliberately, following. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Patel spoke low and fast. "We have enough to bury Rowe, maybe more. But if they know we're close." Mariah didn't need him to finish, because she knew now this wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about exposing an entire network of corruption that had cost innocent people their freedom, and maybe their lives. The black car closed the distance. Mariah reached for her phone, but it buzzed before she touched it. Unknown caller. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, low, unfamiliar, urgent, crackled through. "If you want the truth about Judge Rowe, meet me. Tonight. Alone." Before she could speak, the line went dead. Patel grabbed her arm. "What now?" he hissed. Mariah's eyes darkened. "Now." She turned toward the gathering dusk, heart pounding. "Now we finish what we started." To be continued in part 2. Who was watching Mariah? What deadly secret did Judge Rowe bury? And will Mariah survive long enough to reveal it?